Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming to this event on Next Generation Perspectives on Freedom of Religion or Belief. We know that it's a busy week, so we really appreciate you making the time to be here. We also know many of you will want to head off for the continuation of the dialogue with the Special Rapporteur in 4, so please feel free to do so. My name is Anna Hill. I work for Open Doors International. Today's panel has been organised by the World Evangelical Alliance and is co-sponsored by Open Doors, the World Council of Churches, Christian Solidarity International, the Salvation Army and Stephanus International. Something important to say as we start, please don't take any photos. We have somebody in the room taking pictures. At Open Doors, we have a department on what we call specific religious persecution. We've learnt that your age, ethnic background, and gender have a significant impact on how you experience persecution and discrimination. I'd like to draw your attention to our recent research report, Excluded: Social Isolation of Christian Children and Youth. The QR code here if you'd like to take a look. It found that in 75% of the top 50 countries where it's most difficult to be a Christian, Christian children and youth are socially excluded. This has many negative consequences. For example, mental and physical health problems, a weak church due to inability to grow in one's faith at a formative stage, and marginalization of Christians in education and employment. Today we'll be listening to the experience of Christians aged 25 to 35 living in 3 countries with significant obstacles to the right to freedom of religion or belief. We'll hear about the challenges they experience, the importance of advocacy work in the face of such challenges, and the need for governments to ensure that young people from religious minorities can enjoy their right to freedom of religion or belief. Our first speaker is Salome de Silva, lawyer and researcher from Sri Lanka. She works as section head, legal and research, for the National Christian Evangelical Alliance of Sri Lanka. Her intervention will be by video. She was hoping to be with us in person, but her flight was coming through Abu Dhabi and so got cancelled. So we'll watch her video now.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak today about an often overlooked aspect of religious freedom, and that's the experience of young adults, particularly women, in relation to the freedom of religion or belief. Today, therefore, I would like to anchor my comments to the unique challenges faced by young women who advocate for religious freedom. I will also offer recommendations for governments to better protect religious minorities, emphasizing the need for a gendered lens in policymaking, as well as the vital importance of supporting women who face religious persecution. When we speak about violations of freedom of religion or belief, much of the conversation centers on generalized experiences of discrimination, violence, and persecution. However, for young women, these violations are often layered with additional challenges tied to both their religious identity and gender. Not only are they targeted for their minority religious beliefs, but they also encounter discrimination and violence because they are women. This includes online harassment, threats of violence, and character assassination. For example, in Sri Lanka, Muslim women advocating for reforms to personal law and marital rights within their community have faced public shaming and character attacks, with accusations of being a traitor to their faith, and these attacks also often include accusations of moral corruption and misguided feminism, despite the fact that these women are simply advocating for justice, equality, and reform. Furthermore, today we live in a digital world. The prevalence of online abuse, therefore, is one of the most devastating aspects of this reality for women in informed work. Women who speak out often become targets for doxing, where personal information is maliciously shared online to harm or intimidate them. This results in harassment, threats, and sometimes physical violence. Such attacks often silence women from speaking out on important issues, as they become afraid for their safety, reputation, and career. It creates an environment where fewer women are able or willing to continue their advocacy. For example, following a protest in Sri Lanka a few years ago by women activists seeking a personal law to be reformed, photos of these women were shared online by different religious communities with very derogatory comments. As a result, some of these women activists even stopped participating in such activities as they began facing problems. Furthermore, these challenges do not only come from an interreligious sense, but also from within one's community sometimes. When discussing the challenges faced by women activists, particularly those from marginalized religious minority communities, it's common for their efforts to be undermined or discredited. This discrediting is especially difficult for them because it does not just affect the individual activist, it impacts their entire family. In such communities, women often carry the reputations of their fathers and families, and being publicly attacked for their beliefs can often lead to social ostracism, damage to their personal prospects, and even jeopardize their chances of marriage. An example of this kind of public discrediting occurred when a video surfaced online filmed in a religious space in Sri Lanka, showing a group of religious leaders presenting a slideshow with the faces of women activists, warning the community to be aware of them. This presentation, filmed and shared on Facebook, was a blatant attempt to demonize those speaking up for women's rights. Despite these challenges, women are not passive victims of this situation. Through the work of our organization, the National Christian Evangelical Alliance of Sri Lanka, we have been able to build the capacity of many young women from minority faith communities on technology-facilitated gender-based violence and support them to do their own work to push back against gender-based violence and equip them with strategies to engage safely in human rights advocacy. However, the need for protective mechanisms and legal redress remains. Governments must ensure that legal frameworks exist to protect individuals from online abuse and that victims of FOB violations, especially women, have access to meaningful avenues for redress. As such, governments must approach religious freedom violations through a gendered lens. Policies should be tailored to address how violations affect women differently, including their specific vulnerability to gender-based violence, online abuse, and religious discrimination. And 2, states should strengthen the implementation of existing laws and, where necessary, adopt targeted safeguards to address online harassment, doxing, threats, and coordinated smear campaigns against women, including those advocating on religion or belief. This should include clear reporting mechanisms, timely investigation, proportionate sanctions, and safeguards to ensure that measures to address abuse do not restrict legitimate freedom of expression. Thirdly, governments should move beyond symbolic inclusion and adopt measurable steps to ensure women's participation in FOB-related dialogues and policy processes. This can include setting minimum representation benchmarks for women, including women from religious minorities in interfaith councils, advisory bodies, and consultation platforms. And also, consulting women's groups during drafting or review of laws and policies affecting religion, belief, family law, education, and online regulation. Finally, governments must also ensure that law enforcement officers receive training on handling cases involving gender-based violence linked to religious identity while monitoring and addressing incitement to violence, including online harassment targeting women who speak publicly on religion or belief. Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce Benjamin. Benjamin Daniels from Pakistan. Since 2023, he's been working for the Daniel Khokhar Foundation, an organization dedicated to the right for FOB for Christians in his country.
Distinguished delegates, respected panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here, and I stand before you as a representative of Generation Z, a generation that is young, diverse, and deeply connected. It is increasingly shaped by the realities of the freedom of religion issues. Pakistan is not just a developing country, it is a country with more than 60% of population less than the age of 30. And in our country, the future of human rights, future of development, peace, everything would be largely decided by the young generation, the Generation Z. For Generation Z, the freedom of religion, or religious freedom, is not a theoretical debate or a distant policy concern. It directly affects their choices, their careers, and their future. And let me briefly share 3 realities that describes the challenges of the religious freedom in my country for the Generation Z. First, the impact on careers and economic security. Many young people from religious minorities community grow up with quiet but constant question: will my faith limit my future? Will my faith limit my opportunities, career? And because of this discourages ambitions. And we have seen because of this, it weakens the equal citizenship scenario. Secondly, the painful reality of forced migration. Many of us watched our friends, loved ones leaving the country, not because they lack love for the country, but because they don't think they are safe and accepted in the country. This is not that they have abandoned the country, they feel like the country has abandoned them. And every young person that leaves the country is not just a personal loss, it's a national loss of hope, creativity. And third is the fear for the safety of the next generation. Young parents have this question in their heart that my kids, when they grew up, will their faith make them vulnerable? Will their college be safe for them? Their schools be safe for them? And will they inherit a country that protects them, or they must have to leave? These fears are growing because polarization is increasing. Misinformation spreads rapidly. Accusations turns into violence far too quickly, and the space of trust is shrinking. The reality became painfully clear during the Jadawala incident in August 2023. In Jadawala, more than 25 churches were burned, dozens of homes of Christian families were destroyed, and even the pets in the homes were killed, burned. The educational degrees of the people were also being burned. For many young Pakistanis, Jadawala raised a serious question. If we remain silent, what kind of future are we building? But we choose a different response. We did not respond with anger, withdrawal, or hatred. Instead, we chose engagement and peace building. After Jadawala, we initiated Peace Committees movement, bringing together Muslim leaders, Christian leaders, other faith leaders, representatives of civil society members, youth, and government officials. These are not symbolic meetings. These committees meet regularly, often weekly. They talk honestly about tensions. They identify early warning signs. They work together on community development and social projects. They build relationship before the crisis happens. We often describe these peace committees as firefighters, not news reporters. They exist to de-escalate the situation before the violence erupts, not arriving after the dust settles. And it is also very important to appreciate the current government of Pakistan and establishment of Pakistan. They are making effort to address these challenges, and it has never happened before. The big policy shift needs to be appreciated, and that gave us a margin for these peace committees. We are actively presenting beyond tolerance framework to government stakeholders, and there is growing willingness from the state institutions to stand alongside youth-led initiative. And this is also very important because this sends a strong message to the youth, to the Generation Z, that reform is possible. Things gonna change, and we need to hold on. And then now we want to expand this peace committees, and to whole of the Punjab. We want to initiate 20 peace committees in 20 cities of the Punjab. The goal is to create scalable national framework for early de-escalation and interfaith trust that is being shrinked to less than the zero. Tolerance is not enough. We have seen tolerance failed. For decades, we have learned back in Pakistan and in many places that you need to tolerate him, you need to coexist, but tolerance and coexistence sometimes means that I'm not going to disturb you, but if someone else is doing, I don't have to do anything with it. But Generation Z is calling for something deeper and more courageous. Beyond tolerance, love. Beyond tolerance, respect. And beyond tolerance, co-flourishing. Love is not weakness. Love is not an agreement as well. Love is an intentional commitment to human dignity. Love means choosing relationship over revenge, understanding over suspicion, peace over polarization. Inspired by by the words of Jesus Christ, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. This is not a call for religious dominance, but a moral principle, a call to break cycle of hatred rather than inherit them. And it is not also inclusive to only this Christianity. All the faith groups in Pakistan, they teach about respect, about love, about co-flourishing as well. And with all my speech, in practical terms, this means strengthening legal protection for religious freedom and ensuring implementation, supporting youth-led peace initiatives like peace committees, investing in early de-escalation rather than reactive forces, creating regular space where government, religious leaders, and youth, they sit together and they build trust and they make relationship with each other. Generation Z in Pakistan does not want to flee. They want to stay, they want to build, they want to serve. Religious freedom is not a minority issue. It is a human dignity issue. And how we respond to it today will shape the peace of tomorrow. Let us move beyond tolerance. Let us choose love, not as a slogan, but as a strategy. Because courageous, consistent, and inclusive love is not idealism. It is a pathway to peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that powerful and practical presentation. Next, we have Reverend Dr. Adeboye Godwin Oriyomi from Nigeria. He's an educator, mentor, and theologian. Since 2022, he's served as the African Regional Coordinator for the Oxford Centre for Religion and Public Life. He's going to make a video statement.
My name is Godwin Adeboye. I am a Nigerian. I'm also a researcher focusing on advocacy on violence and religious freedom. I'm affiliated to Nigerian Evangelical Fellowship, NEF. I hold a PhD in religious radicalism and interfaith politics in Africa. And I document violation of religious freedom for policy formulation at the moment in Nigeria. Last year, due to repeated attacks and credible threats, I was forced to leave Kwara State that I've always been living for decades for safety and relocate to Abuja. My research, therefore, is not conducted from a distance. My research is rather shaped by proximity, by vulnerability, and by lived risk. Freedom of religion or belief in Nigeria is legally guaranteed. However, it is equally structurally fragile. In recent months, Nigeria has witnessed a lot of attack and violation of religious freedom. For example, the attack on CAC Church in Neruku, Kwara State, where 38 worshippers were kidnapped during worship and 3 were killed instantly during worship. The abductions from faith-affiliated schools, for example, the St. Mary's School in Papiri in Niger State, where more than 250 young people were kidnapped. 3 worship centers were attacked during worship in Kumiwali in Kaduna State, all within few months. In my ongoing research, I discovered that violation or attack on religious freedom in Nigeria could be categorized or understood in 4 types. 1, there are some attacks connected to blasphemy. There are some connected to abduction. There are some connected to Christian-Muslim clash. There are some that are connected to Fulani, S-men, and ethnic clash. Why these forms of violence affect nearly all Nigerians? The specific impact on young people and their responses remain insufficiently discussed. Young people sit at the epicenter of Nigeria's violence crisis, especially in relation to their freedom of religion and faith identity. Many militant groups forcefully recruit youth, exploiting their energy, frustration, and economic desperation. A dangerous shift is emerging. Many youth in Nigeria are growing tired of dying quietly. Therefore, some are beginning to believe that violence is the only language that violence understands. In addition, some Christian youth are beginning to ask some questions. For instance, why does God not intervene in Nigeria's violence crisis? Or is non-violence approach to violence attack still viable in the course of Nigerian experience? Some are even turning to traditional religions for protection rituals and charms. Others have begun to abandon their faith entirely. Recently, for example, a well-known youth leader in Nigeria came to announce on social media that he has now left his initial Christian faith, explaining the reason why he left. According to him, he believed other non-Christian religions prepare him to approach violence than Christian faith, where turning other cheek is the priority. In communities where entire families are killed within hours, surviving youth are left traumatized, often engaging in self-destructive or immoral coping behaviors and strategies. During my visit in the month of May 2025 to Irigwe community, where over 50 people were killed in one night, I interviewed young man, Joshua, a 24-year-old young man in the community. According to him, his parents were murdered in one night. His both parents murdered one night. But more than the murdering of his both parents, the attackers burned down the family's food storage barn, destroying a year harvest. He lost his family. He also lost his livelihood in one night. Between November 2025 and January 2026, over 100 young pastors were displaced in Kwara State alone. And there are people of other religions also that have been displaced. Many newly married youth now live apart from their families. Some have no livelihood whatsoever because of violence. Despite this ugly scenario, Nigerian youth are not passive victims. Some youth are now beginning to wake up to the importance of humanitarian relief, and they are involved. Many youth now are involved in building peace, and they are involved. Many are now involved in advocacy for religious freedom, and they are involved, even as youth in Nigeria. My own contribution as a Nigerian youth facing this crisis with other youth in Nigeria is I am now involved in some research projects that focus on documenting violence connected to religious freedom in Middle Belt and other parts of Nigeria. This approach matters because policy without evidence reproduces failure. Federal government of Nigeria can take a look at all this scenario and think of policy reform. For instance, the federal government should, I suggest, critically reassess the effectiveness of negotiation with bandits. Some states in the Federation, some governors are reportedly negotiating with bandits in their bid to bring peace. But what we have seen, in spite of the negotiation, is there is no peace even in those states where there is a negotiation with bandits. The federal government should evaluate the limit and the risk of rehabilitating former bandits into the nation's public life. Rural security reform is needed. The federal government can think of establishing security posts that are closer to rural settlement, because bandits, militant groups, have always been exploiting the disconnected villages and rural settlements for attack for many years. The federal government could also improve rural communication technology so that attack can be reported real time and rescue could be ensured on time before it became late. The federal government could also address porous interstate borders. Majority of the violence taking place in Nigeria sometimes take place between interstate borders. The bandits take advantage of porous borders between states within the federation. Communities beyond Nigeria and international communities, relevant stakeholders beyond Nigerian, can also now begin to recognize that Nigeria crisis is not a domestic problem. Nigeria violence security crisis is a regional crisis, and it must be addressed as such. Therefore, Nigerian government needs support. And this support is not only on military aid. Local faith communities and international faith bodies can also think of establishing youth, trauma, and entrepreneurial centers where young widows and displaced youth can be rehabilitated and empowered in the face of violence against them because of their religious identities. Government of Nigeria and other stakeholders in the region and beyond can come together and form a strong strategic partnership that can discuss policy formulation that promotes security in place of worship and in educational spaces where bandits have always taken advantage of kidnapping young people. More than this, there is a need for evidence-based research, because guns alone cannot defeat terrorism. Data, intelligence, and credible documentation are equally essential. Violence against youth is not only an attack for the present, it is an assault on the future of the nation. Nigeria's story is often told loudly, but youth forces remain muted. I have seen young people lose parents. I have seen young people losing their livelihood, lose faith, lose hope. Sometimes they lose everything at once. This is not just a speech I'm giving today. It is a cry for policy reform. It is a cry for accountability and action on behalf of Nigeria's youth whose religious freedom and belief is being negotiated with blood. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, I'm Godwin Adeboye from Nigeria.
Our final speaker today is Marcus Khokhar, who has served for 4 years as Communications and Advocacy Officer to the World Evangelical Alliance here in Geneva, bringing the concerns of national evangelical alliances to the United Nations.
Thank you, Anna. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to respond to these testimonies we have heard today. I thank my fellow panelists, and including those who couldn't be present here today, for bringing the lived realities of young adults into this room, including from young women as well. Their voices remind us that freedom of religion or belief is not abstract. It directly shapes the most formative years of life. Violations of freedom of religion or belief often strike at a decisive stage, when young adults are building careers, forming families, and contributing to society. Those affected frequently speak of, as we've heard previously, uncertain employment prospects due to discrimination, watching friends leave the country in search of safety, anxiety as well about the future of their children and family. These pressures do not only affect individuals, they weaken social cohesion, accelerate brain drain, and risk entrenching cycles of mistrust. When young people feel forced to hide their beliefs, abandon their faith, or in some cases consider retaliation, the long-term consequences for a nation are profound. Yet what we have heard today is not resignation, but determination and readiness. Young people are not asking to be seen merely as victims. They are asking to be included as partners in shaping peaceful and pluralistic societies. They are ready to engage in advocacy, dialogue, and peace building if given the opportunity. There are encouraging examples. So, for instance, a few weeks ago, I've heard from a colleague that in Indonesia, young Christians and Muslims have visited and cleaned one another's places of worship in acts of solidarity and cooperation. Such community-led initiatives demonstrate that trust can be built from the ground up. They deserve support and recognition from both authorities and religious leaders. At the Geneva office of the World Evangelical Alliance, we are committed to amplifying these voices. We work with young advocates from our constituencies, the National Evangelical Alliances, to strengthen their understanding of UN human rights mechanisms and to equip them to engage constructively with authorities, religious leaders, and civil society when they return home. So allow me to suggest 3 practical steps. First, states should ensure meaningful youth participation in national policies related to freedom of religion or belief. Young people should be included not as symbolic observers, but as contributors to policy development and implementation. Second, protection frameworks for human rights defenders should pay particular attention to young FORB advocates who may face intimidation at vulnerable stages of their professional and family lives. And third, modest but consistent support for youth-led interfaith initiatives can have a transformative impact. Safe spaces for dialogue, small grants, and public endorsement by local authorities can strengthen community resilience and prevent escalation of tensions. Excellencies, in a global climate marked by polarization and mistrust, strengthening dialogue is essential. Younger generations are often uniquely positioned to build bridges across religious and identity lines. At this stage of life, they are forming families, professional networks, and community ties that naturally cross boundaries. Including young leaders in interfaith platforms and peace processes is therefore not simply desirable, it is strategic. And I echo the words of Benjamin that the path towards a flourishing, pluralistic society is not found in silence. It is built through engagement, accountability, and sustained peace-building efforts from all sides. Listening to younger generations, especially those from minority communities, is a strong starting point. We know that when minorities can exercise their rights fully and pursue dignified livelihoods without fear, societies as a whole become more stable and flourishing. So if we are serious about prevention and about freedom of religion or beliefs, investing in the next generation is not optional, it is indispensable. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus, and to all our speakers, thank you. We have some time now where we can ask some questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, please just raise your hand and introduce yourself and ask a question of our panel.
So it's a question from Benjamin. So you mentioned a positive change with the Pakistani government as regards freedom of religion or belief, and I have seen it too. I just wonder, is that also the case towards the Ahmadiyya Muslims, or is that something that did not evolve as well as with the Christians, for example?
Thank you for your question. Actually, the change in the policy is for the country, for the whole. It is like there is a space now for freedom of religion, and we have seen that Pakistani government and establishment now have, there were many, some extremist groups that were not only affecting the one community, but all of the communities, and they have now put the ban on them. Also, it is always a ripple effect. And we are very hopeful that we need to push this change more. And yes, there is a change, and we are very happy about it because it has never happened before, like what's happening now.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
Marcus, you mentioned states should meaningfully include youth. And I'm hoping you also mean non-state actors, civil society.
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
we should be doing the same. But could you give some examples of things that you've seen that are actually initiatives that have been done either by state actors or by civil society actors? And could you provide maybe some other examples? I mean, both state actors and civil society actors are here. Give us some suggestions what you would like us to meaningfully engage with youth on.
Thank you, Ed, for your question. I don't have any exactly specific example right now, but for example, I've experienced a very short story. In 2015, there was this celebration marking the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation in Geneva. And I had the opportunity to take part in a short film competition organized by the Geneva Interfaith Peace Platform. And there was this event brought together Muslims, Christians, and other Jews as well, and other denominations that I cannot remember, but around the theme of what is the spirit of Geneva. And this competition was an opportunity to see how Geneva is a city of refuge, because we used to welcome Huguenots who were persecuted in France. And since then, it has been the international city we have known today, and with prominent historical role in the birth of social contract, human rights, and humanitarian law. And all this to say that this interfaith event, now more than 10 years ago, it highlighted all these aspects of international Geneva and brought together young people from various religious communities, including minorities, in a spirit of fraternity, shared humanity, which I would never have had if it had not been for such a framework supported by local authorities in Geneva, the city of Geneva, and the different Geneva religious leaders. So I imagine if this could also take place more often in other countries when minorities face severe discrimination or violence, I think it would be it.
More questions? Hi.
Thank you, Maria Lucio from Arigato International. And maybe building on this, and thank you, Marcus, for sharing that experience, because I actually think that education is critical in this. So your experience of what happened many years ago and how it is now part of how you recall that experience is critical. And as Arigato International, we work on interfaith learning and interfaith collaboration. We have programs in schools, with civil society organizations, with religious communities, to bring people of different religions together. And I think that experience where for the first time a child from a majority religious group in the country meets someone from a minority religious group, that changes the perception of the other. It affects really how they see the prejudices and the stereotypes of the other, and challenges those prejudices and stereotypes. And it happens in these encounters, in the interfaith visits that we conduct when a child gets to go to a mosque for the first time, to a Buddhist temple for the first time. And it's that where I think the investment needs to happen, where we need to see more opportunities, not to wait until children are young people, but actually from the very early years of life, when the prejudices and stereotypes are formed in the minds of children. So I think examples, there are many in terms of these interfaith learning activities in schools. We, for example, work with 6 ministries of education in Bangladesh, in Nepal, in Seychelles, Mauritius, and Indonesia, integrating this interfaith aspect in school curricula. And we are seeing how children start seeing the other, how there is a decrease in not violence, but clashes during the breaks, and how the teachers start understanding how they can integrate dialogue about other faiths in the classroom without being afraid of talking about religion in the classroom. So I just wanted to share this because I do think that those experiences that you have when you are younger will affect the way you see and relate to others in the future.
Thank you for that. I've just asked Benjamin to share something that he told me yesterday, which I think is a really good example.
Yeah, so my father used to tell me that when they were young, the glasses and the cups for the Christians were different, and also for the other faith community. And our Muslims, they do have this discrimination. But now, because in Lahore, we study together, and this youth from all over the Pakistan comes to Lahore, the main city where there are many universities and colleges. We study together, we know each other, and this changed what? I have never faced this kind of discrimination, because the youth that has now come, they are different. And this is one of the examples we see that youth is going to change many things. And it is changing in Pakistan.
Thank you. Okay, yes.
Thank you so much to all the panelists. I would be curious if you had any examples of successful integration of where youth have a seat at the big table, as it were, and particularly in contexts where they are more entrenched cultural beliefs of hierarchy and respect for elders, and which is particularly true for clergy and religious leaders, tribal leaders, village leaders. And because I think quite often, as some of you alluded to, it's often there's kind of a side event or youth are on the periphery. So particularly in context of entrenched hierarchical beliefs, respect for elders, clergy, where have you seen successful examples of youth being actively involved in those contexts? Thank you.
So, yes, this is a new idea. This is also a young idea. And if I see it in Pakistan, there is no exact example that I can give you. But Pakistan is a nation of 60% youth. And yes, we are not saying that these peace initiatives or any big table being only led by the youth, but there should be involvement of the youth. And yes, there should be the elders, the religious elders within the groups, but youth should be as much involved as the elders, because there are more people, there are more youth, and youth understands it more. And we see the change that is more possible through the youth, and that is why we are saying that youth-led initiatives are important.
More questions? We just have a couple of minutes left.
Yes, over here.
Yeah.
How do I? Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you. We are very much interested in more information on country conditions about Pakistan. We have operations in Thailand, where we help refugees from Pakistan, both Christians and Ahmadi. And we also do a lot of advocacy work in Washington, D.C. And we have many Pakistani colleagues raising concern about religious oppression still going on in Pakistan. But the welcoming news is that you are seeing some changes.
Yes.
Can you please explain what prompted the changes from the government side? Thanks.
Yeah. So everything is not right yet, but yes, the change starting to happen, and I have few examples where I see the change. And first, this Christmas, that has never happened before. There was a 30 feet tall Christmas tree in the center of the Lahore. And also, we see there are signboards on the roads in the big cities where they are written, we are not minorities, we are not majority, we are just Christians. So this is the start that we see. And also in the elections that happened, many of the political leaders gave promises, and we see now that especially in Punjab, with the leadership of Maryam Nawaz, she is our chief minister, and she is really pushing the minority youth forward. And yes, there are issues. There are people still being discriminated. There are still cases happening. But the good news is that change is happening, and there is a big policy shift. And that is very prominent policy shift.
Okay, is there maybe one last question before we wrap up? Yes.
One question I had was, some people, I know some who work in India, were actually saying that the intolerance is among the youth, like the radicalization or like very intolerant, and kind of as they get older, people kind of realize, hey, this doesn't really work. So do you see that in Pakistan, that the youth are a little bit more, hardline, or, in relation to anti-blasphemy laws, or do you see, and what are your recommendations on how to target the youth? And how can we educate the youth more, maybe, or reach them at an earlier stage, or than the hardliners?
So in Pakistan, the situation is different because the older people or the people that are not youth, as my father and we have observed, with every coming year and decades, what is happening, the youth that is coming are more tolerant because of what? They are deeply connected. They know the world more. They have saw more of the faith, how everything is happening. So I think in Pakistan, the youth is more tolerant. And what's happened in some cases where they are being, the escalation happened, and you see many youth is there because we are a big youth country. And the escalation parties are always the ones of the other generation. So youth is more tolerant, but they are also a space in their head that anyone can fill it. So we want to fill the beyond tolerance, love and call flourishing instead of the other thing that other people might fit in.
Thank you. That's all we're going to have time for in our panel today. But I wanted to say thank you to Marcus and Benjamin for being here, and for Salome and Dr. Adeboye for sharing their videos. And thank you for coming as well, and for coming questions. And thank you to Janet and World Evangelical Alliance for organising this panel. I wish you a good rest of the day.